Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la app para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
This is Rob Long with Martini Shot for The Ankler. I drove into Los Angeles for the first time in a 10-year-old Subaru. I think it was an NT or something before they even made the Outback. And it had a rusted undercarriage and a permanently shut rear passenger side door. It burned a quart of oil a month and it needed new radiator fluid about that often. And when you lifted the hood, what you saw was a block of iron covered in sticky oil grime. And when I made a little bit more money, I took it to the garage and I asked them to fix the oil leak and look at the radiator. And the guy stopped me mid-sentence and said, look, to fix this oil leak, we will need to steam clean that engine. That's the only way to find the leak. And that's going to end up making a lot more trouble because who knows what all of that burnt, sticky oil is holding together. So I didn't fix the car. I just let it leak, and it ran for another, 2 years almost. It burned a lot of oil, of course. It smelled weird. It occasionally gave off a toxic blue cloud, but it ran. Which brings us to the entertainment industry. Immediately after the director yells cut on a set of any kind, someone else will yell check the gates, or used to. The gates are part of the camera where the film slides behind the shutter, and when you check the gates, you're looking for something like a single hair or a speck of dust lodged somewhere in the tiny moving parts, something that might have come between the shutter and the unexposed film, and you wouldn't know if it was there until the film was processed, and then you'd see a fluttery image appearing in the frame. But by that time, it'd be too late and too expensive to go back and reshoot the whole sequence. So before the company moved on to the next scene, check the gates. These days, of course, everything's digital, so there isn't a gate. I guess there's a chip or a disk drive or something, but check the digital video capture quality has zero romance to it, so we still shout check the gates instead. And there's an ancillary benefit, actually, to using all of that old lingo. It's a good way to remember that the essentials of the movie and TV business, what makes show business run, in other words, have not changed much in 100 years. I mean, a business does not change just because the technology changes. A business only changes when the customer changes. And, show business has had the same two customers since forever, you and me, and advertisers. Now, show business used to be an all-cash business. So, a performer would do a show, he'd look out at the audience, see how many seats were full, and at the end of the night, he would demand his or her cut from the theater owner, who was probably a lying, cheating SOB, but couldn't get away with saying, hey, it was an empty house because the performer was right there on stage. I mean, when you're singing or dancing or telling jokes, you know if there are people in the seats. And then came the movie business, which solved one problem, but as always, created another problem. The movie studios, who were mostly lying, cheating SOBs, paid the performers up front, which took care of that issue, but it split the gate with the theater owners, who were also lying, cheating SOBs, but could get away with saying, hey, it was an empty house because there were a lot of movie theaters and it was impossible to check them all. So the movie studios did a very smart thing. They would identify theaters or theater chains they thought might be skimming, and they'd send private detectives, actual real life, what they called Pinkerton detectives. They sent Pinkertons to find out how many people were in that theater. So for the 7:00 show, say the Pinkerton would buy a ticket at, say, 6:15, and then another one at 7:15. And since all tickets were numbered, it was an easy thing to figure out roughly how many people attended that showing and compare that to the reported box office take for that showing. Now, of course, human nature is what it is, so there was always nearly a difference between the reported take and the actual take. Piles of cash sitting in a movie theater box office in some Depression-era location, that created an irresistible temptation. But the studio bosses knew that. They recognized the moral profile of the theater owners the way house burglars recognize highwaymen. Some of them, in fact, had been movie theater owners. And as long as the skim was roughly within an acceptable range, nobody made a fuss. I mean, it wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. So from the very start, show business was a very leaky business that, like an old car, it made no sense to fix. Remember when Elon Musk bought Twitter in that noisy, chaotic circus, which at the time we had no idea was just a preview of coming attractions, like a spoiler alert to the noisier, more chaotic circus we're all kind of half watching now and half participating in, involuntarily, but still. Anyway, his first act was to initiate something called a code review, which is sort of like having a store clerk restack sweaters while the customer is waiting to pay. Because Twitter then had only one customer, only one source of non-trivial revenue. That's advertisers, still the same way, by the way. Twitter, or X, or whatever you want to call it, is not a technology company. It's an entertainment company that relies on worldwide brands to pay its bills. In that sense, it's a lot closer to a broadcast network from the 1950s than it is to Facebook or Google or, I don't know, ChatGPT. Elon Musk, whether he likes it or not, spent $44 billion to get into show business. It's like one of those old books, Tom Swift and the Amazing Dumont Network. So when Elon Musk focused on the internal guts of the code, he was doing what tech people and engineers and smart people do when they join the entertainment business. He was doing what I did when I asked the guy to fix the leak. The first response is to clear out the underbrush, get things neat and efficient, plug all the leaks, instead of the right response, the show business response, which is to forget about efficiency and focus on important stuff like making movies or kissing the advertisers on the ass. Don't fix the car, in other words. The leaks are what is holding it together. Just focus on the customer. Leaky businesses are not efficient in the traditional bloodless sense of the word, but their inefficiencies mean there are lots of stakeholders and lots of people with skin in the game. In a leaky business like entertainment, agents and lawyers and managers and fixers of all kinds get a little taste of the cash flow. Costume designers and property masters get some under-the-table considerations from their vendors. Isn't supposed to happen, but it does. Theater owners get a little bump of cash here or there. Wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. We're all in this together, is the thinking, and we're all invested in the healthy going concern of the entertainment business as a whole. Now, for a decade or so, the movie business has had one single customer, the ticket buyer, and then came TV, and a second customer appeared, advertisers. And movie studios sold their old libraries to TV, which ran them with big national commercials on broadcast networks, cars, appliances, consumer packaged goods, you know what that is. But later, TV studios sold their old shows and really old movies to local networks, which ran them with local commercials, used car dealers, the local appliance discount warehouse, Ronco's Pocket Fisherman. I mean, there are people alive today who don't know what a Ronco's Pocket Fisherman is. It's so sad. Because back then, everybody got rich because a leaky business got even leakier. In the 70s, cable TV appeared, which launched nearly 3 decades of explosive profit. Customers paid for cable service. Some of that went back to the studios and networks in the form of carriage fees. And they watched ads and they paid for premium channels like HBO and Showtime, but it was still basically the same business, making money from individual ticket sales at the box office or, cable or premium cable, and making money from advertisers. The beaks getting wet from show business during the golden years, which are roughly 1975 to the invention of the internet, or actually the golden years in any business are usually defined as 10 years before you got in, whenever you got in. But in the golden years, the people getting rich were actors and studios and Century City lawyers and local newscasters and CAA agents and the guy driving the cable company van who would come to hook up your cable and who, if you slipped him $20, would get you free HBO. Wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. None of it was efficient. All of it was glorious and profitable. Show business had evolved into a web of revenue streams like the Amazonian rainforests evolved. And it looks like a mess, right? But everything is thriving. And then streaming video appeared, and the new gang from Silicon Valley tried to plug up the leaks and clear out the brush and eliminate advertising. And they introduced an all-inclusive monthly price. And despite their supercharged tech bubble jargon, algorithms, disruptions, on-demand disintermediation, they essentially tried to turn the entertainment business back a century to the single customer days of the 20s and the 30s. But, you know how this went. After a few unhappy quarterly earnings calls, Netflix decided to, they learned what the entertainment business had known for 7 decades. that the business works best when you have an inefficient interplay between two customers, the ticket buyer and the advertisers. So they announced they would implement something they called an advertising membership tier, but it didn't fool anybody. It was ads and subscriber fees, just like old-timey cable, and everybody else followed along. And they also announced they were planning to crack down on subscribers, allowing dozens of family members to use a single login because they wanted to make sure they were getting paid for each viewer. God, when I heard that, it was impossible not to immediately think, oh, Netflix is hiring Pinkertons. In other words, things aren't really changing in the entertainment business. If anything, they are changing back. Wasn't supposed to happen, but did. And that's it for this week. Next week, for The Ankler, this is Rob Long.